Welcome to Three Devs and a Maybe, the podcast series for beginner web developers and general web enthusiasts. Now, introducing your show hosts, Michael Budd, Fraser Hart, Lewis Caines, and Ed Mann.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Three Devs and a Maybe. My name's Ed Mann, and today we are joined by, recurring guest, Joe Watkins. How you doing, Joe?
Hi, Ed. Hi, everyone.
It feels like ages since you last been on the show. It must have been like at least a couple of months.
Yeah, it's been a...
Yeah, because we had a bit of a stage where we were doing quite a few screencasts and stuff, which I still want to get back into. We need to work out some time maybe that we can do those, but I'm sure you've been busy as anything.
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Not a problem, man. But, well, anyway, so how are things going, though, man? What's going on in the life of Joe at the moment?
Well, pretty good. PHP 7's like literally at the end of the month or next month or whatever. I think at the end of this month. Well, yeah, the 26th, I think, it's coming out.
Yeah, because it's an RC7 now, isn't it? If I'm right in thinking.
Yeah, and I think on the 26th is going to be the first... that's going to be 7.0.0.
Wow. And because I know that it had been postponed because it was originally for November 12th.
Yeah.
So were you behind that kind of decision as well to say, look, let's leave it, or was that the project maintainer, like the
No, that is actually the project managers. That's entirely down to them. Man, good decision. I mean, there was an outstanding bug, or maybe more than one actually, but there was one major outstanding bug that was... kind of a roadblock, and then when something like that comes up, you think, oh well, you know, maybe we ought to hold off a bit, and it kind of took the wind out of the sails, I think. But that needed to be done, I suppose. Slow down a bit and give it.
Yeah, because it seemed like it was just full steam ahead on PHP 7. But I mean, this is what happens in any software development, big or small. You're going to get these. I mean, do you know what the actual bug was then that was causing kind of the roadblock?
If I remember rightly, it was connected to garbage collection. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but I'll give you a link to it so you can put it in.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
It was quite a complicated one, and it had all the like Zend guys and Nikki and people that work on the engine trying to figure it out. It wasn't just one of these things like a typo or something simple. It was a fundamental flaw that could be a pain. And so that was what caused the release managers really to postpone.
Well, no, I think that's good on them. I think there was a lot of praise in the community, wasn't there? And I think quite rightly so for doing that. You know, like saying, well, at least you're striving for good quality as opposed to quantity and like early release. I
think it rather amazing that there was any response from the community at all, because in the same position when PHP 5 came out and it was taken over from PHP 4, people didn't care. The community didn't get feedback from the community. I mean, there had to be like a whole effort to get people to adopt.
Yeah, the whole Go PHP 5 thing.
And that's just not happening with PHP 7. I mean, people are itching to get their hands on it. Everyone is itching to get their hands on it. The people that run the servers, because it's cutting their costs by measurable amounts of money. And I mean, the amount of testers that we've got now on 7, like the amount of feedback we're getting on 7 is just way beyond what we got for 5. It was basically, for 5, it was only basically internals doing the testing, and then it got released, and still it was really only internals using it, and then there had to be a whole effort, but because there's a few big name hosts that have got the option to use PHP 7 release candidates already.
So that is crazy good. I mean, that is redonk. I mean, the thing is, that's interesting you mentioned that. Like, what do you think then? Like, why is it shifted? Well, because it's only been, since PHP 5 came out in 09? No, not 09, sorry. It got back in, like, 05-ish?
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
09 was 5.3. That was when it, like, solidified it as...
Yeah. I think what's changed is PHP 5 was an improvement for us, but it wasn't really an improvement for people that pay for the servers, that people that DevOps and server admin.
Yeah, it wasn't going to. Yeah, exactly. It wasn't helping them. It was just helping the developer.
It wasn't going to make their network simpler. It wasn't going to less nodes, it wasn't going to give them anything. So I think that's one major difference. I mean, again, PHP 7 is much better for us, but the only difference is it's got the same kind of improvements that 5 had over 4, only for this kind of decade. But the only difference is that now it actually performs much faster, whereas that wasn't so much the case with 5. I mean, it was more complex, so some things were slower. I mean,
and that's it. DevOps people obviously wouldn't are going to be looking at, okay, well, this is actually going to make my life better as well. So that's
So I think that's what has caused some of these major names to already start letting people run RCs, because they can see that that's going to cost.
And do you feel like the shift is kind of in people trying to keep up to date now, as opposed to staying with what tried and true? Like the whole shift with PHP 7 is, I suppose, like in general, kind of trying to update.
I think the kinds of people that use the majority of people that use PHP are actually using shared hosting. So they don't really have a decision.
Yeah, they don't have an influence on it, do they?
Yeah. They've just got, the only decision they've got to make is what host to use. But once they've chosen a host, they don't get to make any decisions beyond that. So, I think the thing that it drives it has got to be the adoption by shared, it's got to be the adoption by shared companies. I mean, by shared hosting, companies and platforms. Although, it is true that it is much easier to update it yourself now. I mean, almost everyone installs it as a binary from their repository, so they can just upgrade it, and all
that's
the
it
for them. But I don't think that actually accounts for the majority of users. I think it's mostly shared hosting, so it's what they lead the way, sort of thing, for adoption rates.
So it's funny how we do live in a bubble of this idea that, we assume, no one uses shared hosting anymore. But as you say, PHP's main primary use case is still shared hosting.
Yeah, I mean, we try to cater for everything. It's very difficult to do, but that's what we try and do. And the majority of installs that is accounted for by shared hosting. I mean, the majority of the noise that you hear is accounted for by another sector of.
That's absolutely it, yeah.
But the majority of the activity is actually not really them. So,
no, yeah, that's really interesting. And I was just wondering, like, the PHP team themselves, the core, and the project managers, like release managers, do they deal with the whole packaging things up for, like, distributors like Debbie, or they have to just wait for them to do that job? No, we have a Windows team, and they've got their own build system and hardware and people and well, they're not their own people. I mean, they work on the Windows and QA and stuff. But other than Windows, we don't do binaries. It's too complicated. So then that's left for like the these packages.
There are people that do this. There are people that do it for like a job. Do you know what I mean? And they're the people that are best qualified to do it. The package management. There are people that spend all their time doing that, and it's really complicated. So
I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, I was saying that. I mean, we did a very, again, self plug from both of us here with the podcast, the screencast we did a while back. On discussing, compiling PHP from source, and I mean, you can do that if you want, to get the best, from it, performance of it. But as you say, it's nice to have tried and true package that someone who's, their job is to build these packages up, and provide the best configuration.
I mean, hardly anyone's got one server. Do you know what I mean? So it's easier to upgrade if you've got a farm or even just a few servers. It's easier to just upgrade with the repository rather than doing it on one and then an hour later being able to do it on another.
Absolutely. And so what I'm assuming, once 7 comes out, you then do the PHP team has no say in when this is available, released, on these package managers. You just have to wait for them to pick it up, which again can be a bit of a pain.
They're already packaging RCs. I mean, it will be available on the day that it's.
That's brilliant.
Tagged. Yeah, I wouldn't really recommend. I mean, as with any bit of software, you don't really want to deploy something that's got a 0.0 version number, because stuff's going to bite you, and it's going to come out, but you don't. Use it, test it, but don't actually deploy it. Get it into your, integrate it into your kind of workflow, so that you're testing it with your current version of PHP, so that you can find regressions, but don't actually deploy it until either there's really good feedback from the community, or the first round of nasty bugs are found. I mean, we might have already found them, but people don't usually deploy version 0. That's usually
you always wait for version 0.1. Wait for the .1 release. You know, I say iron out all the major kinks, and that's a neat one actually. What are you planning to do? Because your day job, obviously, you run a PHP stack. And you're using probably 5.3 at the moment. 5.6. Sorry, yeah. Why 5.3? I was saying 5.3. 5.6 at the moment. Just wondered what are you going to be doing on the 7 route? Then are you again like set up a server for regression or at the moment, or are you just going to?
I haven't done it yet because we're waiting for me. I haven't finished uopz yet. It's still got a couple of problems, so they're waiting for me. But what we'll do, what I just said, we'll integrate PHP 7 into the workflow, into the testing workflow, so that it gets tested alongside 5.6, and then once we're sure that there is no problems, we'll just deploy.
That's awesome.
Probably won't be on 0.0, and I don't do any of that. We've got like guys for that, like actually in the work in the office attached to the data center. So we don't even log into the servers to do any of that. I'm allowed to tell them how to do it, but that's it. I don't actually do it myself.
Let them do it, get their hands dirty with that.
Yeah, I just give them like the configure line.
Yeah.
So to tell them what to build and what to build shared and that, and then they just do it.
They do it. That's cool. And so how is uopz going then? Because because I know you on the last podcast we were talking about pthreads and how that had been successfully moved over to PHP 7, compatible with that, and now uopz. So what's the progress like on that?
Well, there's one failing test, but
I was waiting for the but. I was thinking one failing test, that's great, and then but.
But the failing test is, there's only one failing test in my test suite. When I try to actually run a full test suite with it totally crashes. There's a problem with copying strings, and I know what it is, but I just haven't had the morning yet I've sat down a few mornings and tried to work it out a few ways, and worked out by doing that what the problem is and how to fix it, but I haven't actually come up with a new solution yet, so I just haven't done it.
That's right. So you just, I mean, it is possible then. So there's nothing that you've been able to like beat your head, like kind of cross with what's going on.
I mean, it is possible, but there is actually a kind of flaw in the idea. There is actually a flaw in the idea because of the way that functions are cached. The way that the actual function entry is cached when it's called. When it's called at first, inside the body of a function, you've got the call to foo. The first time, say you've got it twice, just foo and then foo. The first time, the engine will have to do a hash table lookup for the function entry by name. So then the second time, and then it caches the result. So then the second time, it doesn't have to do the lookup. So, the problem is that I can't change these caches from uopz, and you don't want to change the way that caching works, and you don't want to disable it or anything drastic like that. And the problem is that it only really works, say, to override a function, which is one of the main features of uopz. It only works if you do it before you've called the function, because if you call the function,
it'll then already have the cached version.
You can't change the cache. So there is a kind of a flaw in it. Now, I knew about this, but it just never occurred to me that anyone would use it like that, and then someone opened a bug. And I was like, yeah, I know about this, but I'll try and look for a way around it, but I don't think there is a way around it.
So this is a flaw that's been there all the time then?
Yeah.
So it's not, it's not a flaw as only for PHP 7, it's just like a way use case.
No, it's always been there, yeah. I mean, five caches functions as well. But the way it's kind of intended to be used is you kind of modify the environment, run your tests, and restore the environment.
That's what I would assume. Yeah, because it's interesting. What was the use case then that they'd shown? Like, was it about like?
There wasn't one. There was just code that called a function, then replaced it.
So it's just
then
like
called it again.
Yeah.
And he was surprised that it didn't call the replace function. And I suppose rightly so in a way. But I knew it was like that, so I wouldn't have expected it to work. But he opened a bug for it, and that's probably the only
It's as you say, it's a strange one to want. You know, the kind of use case of wanting, but I suppose the way that the API is built is you can use it in that way.
Maybe it would be better to if you try to replace a function that's already been cached.
Yeah, say that's it exactly. Yeah, throw and say you can't.
It would involve overhead, and it might not be worth it, and it might just be better to say, well, no, use it as intended. It's meant to be used in unit tests, and like the test case, the PHP unit framework test case has got like a set up before class and tear down after class, like hooks, and that's what it's intended for. Unit testing, you're meant to modify the environment, run tests, then restore it, and that's how it's meant to work.
And it is quite an advanced library. I mean, it's not something that you're going to be using day to day, you know.
Yeah, you're not going to. I mean, there's a couple of like the composure function's quite cool, and some people have said, "Oh, we should have that. We should have that in the core." But I don't know. But no, you don't want to take it to production. It's a testing thing, and that's what it's meant to be for. There was
the compose one, you know, building up new classes based on
based on just a list of like interfaces and traits and an array of functions and properties and stuff. It was so that we didn't have to keep hitting autoloaders and create weird named files and that for tests for really not very nice code. And But it's
legacy code, and this is the thing, you know. This is solving a problem. I want to get my system under test that's legacy. So,
and I'm not even sure if we actually did use it in the end. But it was like we were brainstorming what things might make it easier. And while I was writing uopz, everyone else was, you know, trying to write the tests, and they might have found other ways. I'm not sure if we actually use it now. I don't think we do. Because we were in the process of taking legacy and trying to make it modern. So at first, I think we did use it, and now we've made it so that we don't have to. But it was so that you could override the fetch class and new opcodes, and then compose a class on the fly. Just if that opcode was hit, requesting a class that the autoloader couldn't load, or that you wanted to mock some fancy way. That's probably the only one of the functions that you might write something that's based on that. But anything else, it's just for testing. There was a whole thing on. I just happened to search for uopz on Twitter, and I saw loads of people saying, "Oh, this is why we hate PHP," and then link into the uopz overload function.
What?
Yeah, I really did.
Did they give you any other content, any other reason other than this is why we hate PHP?
Oh, there's loads of them. Search uopz overload on Twitter. There's loads of them. This is why we hate PHP, and I can't think of a reason why you'd want to do this, and all that kind of thing, and just totally missing the point. Totally missing the point. It was already possible. The reason it existed at first was just to overload exit.
Yeah.
Because you don't want your test suite.
That's it. In legacy code base that uses exit, you don't want it. To. You
don't really want it to die halfway through a code, halfway through a unit test, because you can't carry on. So that's why it existed. And then once we'd done that, we realised, well, actually, we could overload a few others, like ones that load classes that would hit the autoloader. And then we could use that to compose classes on the fly, and it kind of grew up like that. But it wasn't like this is a thing that you're meant to write frameworks around and base components off of. It was just this is a hack that might be useful for writing tests.
Yeah, this is a hack that's going to help you with code that you've already got, you know.
Yeah.
That's again, because I mean, that's the thing in your use case, your problem domain there was, I have a legacy code base that I need to get under test, and I can't change, it's unfeasible to say, let's just change the whole, code base.
Yeah, I mean, eventually that's what you're aiming towards.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the day, when you're given the task of this code needs testing, then the code needs testing, you can't start by changing. You can't
just say, okay, give me 6 months now, and don't use, and I'll give you a new code. But that never works anyway. It's better to do square root factor loops.
You can't swap one set of untested but working code for code that's tested but isn't proven.
Yep.
It just doesn't make sense. You do it bit by bit. You don't take the risk, like for the business, you don't take the risk of swapping one code base for another. No one does that. They upgrade it bit by bit. Because that's the most sensitive.
There are plenty of stories out there, horror stories, of people trying to build from greenfield, and failing.
The best ones probably come from the video game development sector, where you've got people trying to rewrite engines and taking literally decades to rewrite engines from scratch. I think it's called Unreal or one of them.
All right.
There was a whole thing about it. It's like really famous in the game development.
I'll try and find that and put it in the show notes. That's interesting. Again, yeah, I mean, that's it, try and spending decades, and that's understandable. You just go down the rabbit hole and you just keep going.
And yeah, it just never ends. It never ends. People come along and they fund it, and then more companies fund it, and it just goes bust. It never finishes. So you can't write code like that. Everything about the development of big projects just prohibits you from throwing everything away and starting
Absolutely.
Again.
Yeah, it's just, you can't tell your investors that. You can't tell, there's not value in that.
No.
And actually, so we touched upon a bit about pthreads, and I was just wondering, because one of the things actually we did talk about the last podcast was the polyfill, or the concept of a polyfill, and then eventually you released a blog post on it, and also someone was speaking about the idea of a polyfill in a GitHub chat with you, and then you built this polyfill. I'm just wondering, how did that go? Has it been, you got good traction?
Oh, I don't know really. I don't know. I haven't checked. It's out there. It's on Composer, but I think most people that use pthreads don't actually use PHP or Composer. They just download the code from GitHub. Because a couple of the big projects that use it have got like their own build script, if that makes sense. Like they bundle their own version of PHP and stuff, so they pull everything in from source and then set it up and then bundle that like environment. They distribute that environment. So that's where most of the activity comes from, like on a big scale.
Is that where you see it in the issues and the pull requests and things? Yeah, that kind of use case.
They're the people that ask the most questions and like that. But it's out there.
No, it's a really clever idea. I mean, for the audience, essentially what it was that, pthread, it's similar to like have a JavaScript polyfill or something, where you've got this bit of implementation. Well, this kind of is kind of a different in a polyfill. Well, I suppose it is a polyfill in the true sense of a polyfill, because it's, the feature, if the feature's there, it will use that one, else it will degrade gracefully and other means to achieve the same thing.
Yeah. It's a polyfill for pthreads, because just like a polyfill for JavaScript
that's it.
Because it hasn't got support, your PHP environment might not be able to actually load the pthreads library, and so
this will keep it working. This will and like you said, you could then say, the great thing about this would be able to benchmark. Okay, does your code need this? Because you'll be able to write it using this.
And I think it's a great learning tool as well. For that as well. But I don't know if there are that many people that are out to learn that kind of thing. One bloke wrote quite a good blog post on it. I don't know if you saw it on Reddit, called Thread Carefully.
Oh yes, actually I did. That was a really good read.
Yeah, it was a good read. Most of it was right as well. I was really quite surprised.
You were waiting to pick holes, thinking, "Oh no, he's going to say something." No, actually, it's good.
There was stuff wrong, and I did send him a little gist and that of changes I would make, and asked him if he was interested in writing one for PHP 7, because I find it difficult to write about it, because I don't know what people want to hear. I don't know how they want.
Because you're so deep in the obviously the problem space. Difficult. It's hard to see it. Yeah.
it's really difficult to know where to start and what way to go and what people don't understand, or what's difficult to understand if you don't already know it. So I think it's better coming from just someone who hasn't been involved in writing it.
And is learning it for the first time probably.
And is dealing with all the problems that they will deal with. So hopefully he's going to get back to me and we'll cooperate on a PHP 7 one, because that's what I really want people to use, because PHP 5 is just dead to me.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. And actually, speaking about PHP 7 stuff more, is the Inspector project that you've been working on. Because I noticed that, a little bit of activity on your GitHub there for that. I'm just wondering, for the audience, can you just give them a brief overview of what that is?
Yeah, it's basically a disassembler. It shows you a kind of human readable representation of the internal representation of a function. So the internal representation of a function is based on opcodes. Each instruction is an opcode, and it shows you what the name of the opcode is and whether it uses temporary vars or compiled variables or variables or constants and things like that. And it allows you to break down a function into that kind of detail, which is useful for learning, firstly, and it's sometimes useful for debugging if you don't understand. Zend Optimizer actually changes opcodes, so that it might actually, your code might behave differently with or without it. So it's a good debugging tool there, because you can see what the opcodes are with it.
You can actually see, what the result, the ending output actually is.
I'm kind of hoping that I'm not very good at front end stuff, like things you actually look at. So I'm hoping someone's going to do like a more front endy version of that. Sebastian, the guy who wrote PHP Unit, he seemed interested in a kind of static analyzer type tool that he wrote before, and that was based on some old extension that's not maintained anymore. So that's kind of what it's aimed at, that kind of tooling. So that's what that is, yeah.
That's cool. And is this all possible due to the AST now in PHP 7?
No, it doesn't use the AST.
Oh wow!
Because the AST gets destroyed. So by
this is the output of. Sorry, yeah.
By runtime, it's not actually there unless you do something fancy. And if you do something fancy and keep it around, you're going to suck up loads of memory, because the AST is designed to be allocated and then destroyed, and not kept around. So it's not like super efficient, as a storage mechanism of information. It's not super efficient.
So this literally disassembles the code from...
That's actually generated from the AST. So you could have done it in PHP 5 as well.
And what kind of drove you to do this then? Was there a pressing issue you had, or you just felt like it was a cool idea?
There was a thread on Reddit about serializing functions. You could use it to do that,
I know that there's a composer package that you're able to serialize closures.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you serialize that would be very
Closure's just a closure's basically a function. It is an object, but you can get internally it's a function. So it started out as that, so that you could the idea was that someone else could write the PHP library that allowed you to disassemble and then reassemble. But there is a problem with that, in that it's hugely complicated to reassemble it after you've disassembled it, because Zend is a mess. Each opcode is supposed to have one or two operands and then a return value, and then each operand can have meter information attached to it. So can the return value, and the usage of the meter information is extremely inconsistent. So that no one can you couldn't write a nice neat table saying, so for the Zend add opcode, it's got op1 and op2, or left and right if you like, and then the return value, which is the result. And you can't write a table that describes each opcode in that much detail and more, saying what the meter is in op1 and what the meter is in op2 and what the meter is in op3 and what they mean. And sometimes they're addresses and sometimes they're relative and sometimes they're absolute, and sometimes it depends on what architecture you've got and what compiler you've got and things like that. And so it's so complicated and so inconsistent that reassembling it is it's not feasible. It's just not feasible. So I gave up with the reassembler. But already Sebastian had said, I like the idea of a disassembler because that would allow me to statically analyze it and do this thing. So I thought, well, I'll move. Initially, the disassembler and assembler started in uopz. And then I thought, well, I'll move it out to a different extension. And so I'll work on it separate, for that. So yeah, that's how it started.
That's really cool. That's really, really interesting. Have you got any other kind of, because the static analyzer then, so how would that kind of work then? You would, each function then it would...
Oh, well, it would use reflection and whatnot to find out what functions were in a... Actually, Inspector can disassemble a global function or a class or a function. So it would most likely be like a class-based, like OOP thing.
Yep.
So it would just give it a list of classes to disassemble, and then it would loop through the disassembly looking for things that it doesn't like, such as dead code and comparing values of a different type, or passing a variable of a certain type to a function that accepts a different type and things like that. So you can tell that from just the assembled code. Obviously you can tell that, but that's the kind of thing I suppose he would be doing with it.
That's cool. And another project you work with is APCu.
Oh God, yeah.
No, full credit to you, because today, you sent out a tweet saying that you'd well and truly effed up. But then someone replied, and I was about to like it before we just did this podcast, saying, well, it's as big a thing to fix the problem as it is to admit to the problem. Well, sorry, as big a thing to admit the problem as to fix it as well. So fair credit, and you've released a blog post on it, and it's just what, kind of people, who have either read the blog post or not read the blog post yet, kind of explain what's happened kind of there.
Okay, well, APCU is just the user part of APC, so that you can just cache variables. When it was decided that Zend would get opcache, I basically took over the maintenance of APCU, and I'd done it in quite a flurry. I do most things in quite a flurry. I do them quite.
Was this a work problem that you needed it for as well, or just felt?
No, this was
the community's going to need this.
Yeah.
Still, yeah, no, absolutely, and people still do use it. Oh, we were using it, still recently.
It genuinely was. It genuinely was a case of this needs to be done by someone, and no one was coming forward to do it. And it's although it's a cache, it's kind of it's in my area because it deals with concurrency and things like that. So I took a flick through the code and I understood it, and so I thought I would put myself forward to do that. And so the first night I just kind of got it working and kind of reviewed it, and then I decided that it was a mess, and it was a mess. It is a mess. Not APCU's not, but APC is a mess. It's got all the code for like APC fetch, say, is just inline in the PHP function, and this makes it really quite difficult to understand and impossible to reuse, and So what I'd done was I decided I was going to tidy up locking, and I was going to tidy up all of the rest of it, so that you could, because APC is based on a really quite clever memory allocator. Well, it's quite a standard memory allocator, but it's also well tried and tested. So
how does that work then? Just kind of
memory allocator. Well, it uses shared memory. It uses shared memory. So that's different from normal memory, because normal memory can't be shared across processes. Shared memory, mapped memory can. So when you're given a chunk of a mapped memory, it'd be like a chunk, like 32 megabytes, 4 megabytes, or whatever. And like you only allocate like 32 bytes at a time. So the allocator takes care of the chunk of memory for you and deals it out in little bits, like malloc does in C. So I wanted to save that, and more than that, I wanted it to be reusable in other extensions, because other extensions like opcache and other extensions need this functionality of map memory shared between processes. So I wanted to reuse it in other extensions, and so I made an API out of it, and I tore apart the code into little tiny pieces and put it all back together really tidily, like I'd written it. And it was all great, and like Rasmus looked at it and he was like, "Oh, great, good work," and that. And everyone thought it was great, and we pushed it to Peckle, and it's been out there for like a few years now. And then, so quite a few people have opened bug reports, and they can't give me reproducing code, and they can't describe in enough detail to me what causes the problem, but they're all the same kind of phantom bugs that you get when you've got problems with concurrency. So I've read this code over and over again over the last, since like the first pull request, since the first bugs opened about 2.5 years ago of this nature, and I've read the code over and over and over. And I observe that in a couple of places it looks like it uses either mutual exclusion, which used to be the default for APC, but when we released APCu, I made the default read-write locks. And it looked like when read-write locks were used that sometimes a read lock would be acquired and a write would be performed. And I knew about this, and I thought, well, APC does it, and it's been deployed for years, and if I change it, it's going to change the performance characteristics of the cache. And then, about a week ago, I just decided I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to fix it and change the performance characteristics of the cache. There's no point in a cache that's fast but breaks every so often. So I just done it, and I fixed it, and I thought, right, this is what we'll do. And then I was writing a blog post this morning about the different types of lock-in and the benefits that exclusive lock-in has over read-write lock-in, which I can explain if you want. But I was writing about that anyway, and so I was trying to make my argument, and I made a search on LXR, the thing that lets us search PHP code, and I realised that I had simply copied the code wrong, and I had never looked at the original APC code. I'd always looked at my base branch, which was already highly modified. And I simply never looked. It literally 2 lines. I'd never looked at them in the original code until this morning. And I realised while I was writing the blog post, I've just fucked up. I just copied the code wrong. And that was what.
It happens to the best of us. That is what you can get from this. Oh man.
I mean, but now all these bugs that we've got, they make sense.
So what were the 2 lines then in like kind of a higher level? What were they doing?
Oh, okay. So there's a reference count on each entry in the cache, and so that okay, say you do a find, yeah, on the cache. You do the find and you lock up, get a read lock, so that's shared. So you're not supposed to do writes. You get a read lock, you get the entry, then you release the read lock, then with the entry that you've got a read lock on, you increase the ref count with a read lock, but you do it atomically. At the old APC, you do it atomically. It increases the ref count, and then it copies the entry into the local request memory. PHP copies it into the request memory, because you can't use it straight from shared memory. You have to copy it out.
Yeah.
And then you decrease the ref count. Now, the problem is that if it's not done atomically,
and atomically means, do it all or do nothing at all.
Yeah, well, it means do it and don't allow another process to do the same thing while I'm doing it, and do it atomically at once, sort of thing, and don't let anything else happen while it's going on. So that when the garbage collectors go in another process, the ref count might get decreased, but it doesn't see it. So it assumes it's not garbage anymore, but it is, because another process is just decreased it, but it can't see it because it wasn't done atomically. So that's the problem. Stuff ends up staying in the cache and getting in a weird state, like it can't be collected because the ref count gets below 0 or something strange like that. So that's basically what the problem was. The ref count being increased and decreased with only a read lock acquired, and not atomically. So
and this is why those bugs hadn't been, because I suppose you've probably looked at the APCU kind of issues and think, well, there's things aren't happening there.
Yeah, I look at them every time I've got a spare weekend. I think I've got to look at APCU. I do it literally. I must have done it 50 times over the last few years. Maybe 30 times over the last few years. I've sat down.
I've got some spare time now. I need to look at APCU.
Yeah, and I've read the code of APCU, and I've read it over and over and over, and I just don't. I understand what's going on, but I just think, well, I can't change. Like I said, I can't change it. It will change the way the cache performs, and people might be relying on that, and I'll get complaints saying, "Oh, it's really slow," or "It does weird stuff." But then I just thought, I'll just do it because the solution's better than no solution. But yeah, that's what the mistake was. I just copied a couple of lines of code wrong and a bit of a few macros.
Man, it happens to the best, as I say, man. And your blog post was really interesting actually, because you gave a brief explanation of all of the different types of locks and kind of things like that. And I was just wondering, would it be alright just to go through them, maybe kind of just expand on what each one of them?
Yeah. So the most basic, everyone knows about, is file locking. So that's, don't really think I need to explain that. That's F-lock and things like that. So nobody really wants to use that, but it's there for history's sake and for people that are using PHP on really weird embedded systems and things like that. And then there's mutex, which is, means mutual exclusion, and they're exclusive locks, so that, if one process acquires the lock, no other process can acquire the lock, until it releases it. And then there's read-write locks, where, only a write's exclusive. So if you acquire a write lock, no one else can read and no one else can write while you have the write lock. But read locks are shared, so that, many people can acquire a read lock. So this increases performance by, obviously, if you've got entries where you write them and then for the rest of their lifetime you just read them. They don't get updated, they're not high frequency. So this increases performance massively because you don't have to lock. In effect, you don't have to lock because all of your processes can read the same entry at the same time. And then there's, spin locking, which is the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, so what is spin locking then?
It's,
because I've never heard of that one.
It's basically a busy wait loop, a predicated busy wait loop. So a while condition continue, and it just goes over and over in the loop until the condition changes. and it literally sucks the hell out of the CPU. It will literally to 100%.
What is what use case would they need that?
Well, believe it or not, Postgres SQL are really quite popular server.
Yeah, we use that in production.
It's their code.
All right.
For some reason, everyone knows that writes multi-threaded code in C that spin locks are crap. I mean, if I just described it to you there and you know it's crap, you don't have to have ever used one. You can tell that that's going to be crap. I mean, there's no way for it not to be crap. But they at one point preferred it over mutual exclusion and read-write locks. I have no idea why.
Do you know if it's still in production use there, or like, is there code? Was it just copy and pasted over, essentially?
Well, it's code in the public domain sort of thing, but it's originally from Postgres. I mean, in 2011, people are still writing about spin locks in Postgres.
Wow.
But it might not be the same spin lock. It might be an evolved version of it that rather than continue, it waits. It sleeps rather than continues, and then it wakes up based on some other condition. I don't know about it anymore, but I know that the one in APCU, which is originally from Postgres, is...
So why did APC have all these different ways of doing it? Was it because of the based on the fact file, if you had to use file?
It's just based on that, basically. Another thing is, now, a mutex and a read-write lock, them being able to be shared among processes is not common among all implementations. It is quite common in the sense that today it's usually okay to rely on that, but it's old code, and it wasn't always. FreeBSD, you can't share, I think to this day, you can't share mutex across process boundaries. It doesn't allow it. So that the spin lock is the only option in those cases. It's better. It might be better than a file lock. It might perform better than a file lock.
So that's why then you'd use that kind of way.
Yeah. For embedded systems and weird systems where the things like normal stuff like shared mutex are not available.
Well, at least that makes sense, kind of. Yeah. At least, like to make it possible.
Yeah. I've only just remembered that about FreeBSD while we were talking about it. But
that makes more sense.
I remember someone reported a bug on FreeBSD, and then I compiled it there just with the default options, and it came up. It was going to use spin locks, and I thought, oh, fuck. I was reading about it, and it was the reason was I looked at what it could be, and then it turned out the reason was that they don't allow, for security reasons, for you to share mutex across process boundaries. You've got to use some other.
Wow. And then as you say, that's still better off performance-wise than using file-based locking. It
might be, and like today, that's a bit laughable because of SSDs and stuff. But it might have been, all them years ago when everyone was still using big clockwork disks.
And another thing with APCU actually is the APCU entry function that you've added. You were discussing. Okay. I was wondering, giving an overview of that. Yeah,
well, okay, so the problem is, normally, your usage of a cache will look like, you check for, you try to fetch an entry by name, and if it doesn't exist, you'll do the work to generate the entry, and then you'll store it.
That's it, yep.
Now, obviously, if you've got dozens, hundreds of processes, when they all start up and they all first get their request, they all do the same thing. So, while before the first process has got to the bit where it writes, all the other ones are going to be executing that same expensive code that you wanted the result of caching.
Because they've all started off saying, none of us have got this in the cache. Yeah. Brilliant, let's all start this horrible work.
So they all do it, and then within like a second, APCu will stop them actually writing the cache entry, but they still generate it. They still do.
They've still done all the hard work of actually making it.
Writing the entry is extremely cheap. It's generating the entry.
Generating that value.
So the problem is that you release the lock. Obviously, when you come out of the call to APC fetch, you can't hold a lock on the cache. So that all the other processes are free to travel the same code path and do the same work. So the idea was, completely separate from this locking stuff, the idea was to give you a way to atomically warm the cache, so that one process, no matter how many, say you've got, dozens is quite conservative estimate of how many processes you might need. Some servers have got hundreds of processes, so only one of them gets to actually do the generation, and all the others will block while it does the generation. But the thinking is that if it's a common entry, like a common thing is everyone uses distributed caches now, like memcached or whatever. So a common thing is to pull stuff from memcache and keep it in the shared cache if it's not high frequency and you don't need to keep hitting the distributed cache. It's cheaper and reduces the traffic on the distributed cache if you fetch some stuff like configuration and that kind of thing out of a local APC cache. So the idea is that you can do that atomically, so that only one of your processes will hit Redis, not every, hundreds of them or dozens of them. So that's the idea behind it. It allows you to atomically fetch or generate an entry, and it's useful for atomic warming of the cache, but it's not intended to replace normal usage.
It's just dealing with this use case that's the Stampede and herd kind of thing.
Yeah, the Stampede problem.
And then the sort of signature of that is like the key, and then you have a callable or that you're able then to call or close it. Yeah,
a generator not an actual generator in the PHP sense, just like a function that generates the value to cache, and it just accepts the key, the name of the cache entry. And then whatever it returns is cached and and then returned. So
no, that's really cool, man. That's awesome work. Is there? I was just say, is there any other things you've been? You've been, by the sounds of it, you've been really busy with like APCu and things like that, and uopz. And just wondering, is there anything on the PHP 7 horizon that you've been working on, like kind of settings like the UString stuff? Have you been able to do more work on that?
I actually haven't had any time to work on UString. I've got I'm supposed to be doing 2 RFCs, but I just haven't really had the time. I haven't really had the time to work on any of them yet. I've done quite a bit more work on pthreads, just tidying up the API and stuff, and bump the version number. But no, I haven't had time for anything else really. uopz has taken up all my time.
I can imagine that. Yeah, I can definitely imagine that. And what else I was going to actually ask is what kind of things do you kind of envision you want to do in PHP next? Have you got any ideas? Because I know that you're stabilizing on pthreads and and uopz and stuff. Is there anything because now you're maintaining those projects and you're in more of a maintenance mode? I know you did a massive shift on the pthreads 3 stuff, the way it was done there. But is there any kind of things you want to solve? Any problems you want to solve? Any work-based problems that you need to solve? Kind of new project-wise things that are coming around?
Well, I'd like to have a bit of time to look at the JIT problem, but it's really complicated, and I don't.
Yeah, because I know Anthony's been working on bits of that, hasn't he? You and him both kind of worked together to get JITFU kind of working.
Yeah, well, we've played with it. We haven't really got a solution. I think it's probably time to actually start looking at as a proper Zend implementation rather than some. We've made some toys and that, and they're interesting, and they taught us a lot. But I think to take it to production, it needs to be as low level as possible. And I know a bit about it. I don't know a lot about it. I know a bit about it, but LLVM is the most complicated thing in the world. It's huge and it frequently changes, and I don't know. I haven't spent a lot of time with it, and I can't really justify spending like work time on it. So it's something I'm
it's a pet project more than anything.
I'm thinking about doing it at weekends or maybe taking a few days off to have a look at it. But I'd like to look at that because I think it'll happen in one of two ways. Either no one gets involved and Zend will do it on their own, which is fine and everything, but
you end up with what we have with PHP Next, where it just kind of appeared out of nowhere.
No one understands it except for a handful of people, and it's really difficult then to actually develop it, and it takes everyone else months and months to catch up. It would be better if we kind of did it in the open, where a few of us done a bit of research and then we pulled it together and we tried to just develop it like organically between us rather than one person's vision. Because one person's vision is not likely to ever, be the same as a big group of people in any subject. So I'd like to spend some time on that. It'll either happen one way or the other. Either Zend will do all of it, or some of us are going to have to, get started before it gets to happen the first way, where Zend just do it.
So do you feel this is the next step kind of thing?
Well, no, I think
because there's been significant improvements with PHP 7 on its own, hasn't there? Like speed wise, it's that's the selling point you say for DevOps and people like that. So
yeah, I think Dimitri at Zend is talking about 7.1 as a target, but I don't think this makes any sense. I don't think we need to make it that complicated so quickly. I think it'll probably be a version 7. It won't have to wait until version 8, but I don't think he imagines it's going to be an extension or like an extension of opcache, which I don't think it can be.
Yeah, because internally, could it be that way that you could
yeah, I mean, they've implemented one. It could be that way, but I don't think that's the best way to do it. I think the best way to do it is have it be as close to Zend as possible, rather than inventing new hooks and trying to manipulate Zend in the way that extensions have to do to get work done. It would be better if Zend had a way to switch modes and Zend could do everything, independent of what extensions were loaded and in what order and whatever, how they're configured and whatever. It would be better if it just done it without extensions. That would just be better.
No, that sounds brilliant. That sounds like interesting things up on the horizon then for you.
Yeah, and maybe another thing to look at might be there's a lot of talk of introducing like native support for async functions.
That would be, because I know you've been working, your promise stuff is, really cool.
Yeah.
That works on the premise of like pthreads and stuff like that, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's parallel. It wouldn't be that. It can't do parallel, but I mean, Zend can't on its own do parallel, so it would be just like what HHVM has, or C# or one of these newfangled languages. But no, it is good. I mean, it is cool, but I question whether we've already got ways to do that with generators, and I just question whether we're really going to get anything more out of it by kind of duplicating a lot of the functionality. It's another scheduler, and we've kind of already got a way to do that to schedule code, and I don't know if it's going to make sense, but I don't know.
Do you feel that there could be just a library built on top of like generators that could deal with this?
There's many. There's at least two that I know of, AMP and Icicle, that are really good. And I'm not really sure whether it's a good idea to make it so complicated that only a few of us can work on it. I think better that we provide the tools and the actual implementation comes from the community. So
that's it, user land where people can, work on it.
Maintain it,
easy, yeah.
Because
it's another thing that you then have to maintain, as opposed to just providing the infrastructure that allows other people to build on top.
And it's not just that as well. It's kind of everyone that develops PHP obviously uses it, but we may not use it in the same ways that everyone else does. And it kind of makes more sense for the people that use it in the normal way for them to develop how it should be, rather than us decide how it should be and how it should work, and what it should do. I just think it would be better for the community done that, and that's what, you know, the projects in the open can do. I mean, PHP's in the open, but just by virtue of the fact that it's going to be C and it's going to be complicated C.
There's a bit more barrier to entry, isn't there?
Yeah. So I just don't think, I think there might not be anything to gain from it, and I would rather it, you know, I had to go and someone else had to go, and a few of us had to go at it, and we can either see this is going to work, this is going to give us a decent improvement over, like such an improvement that the argument from the organic community implementation goes away. It's just, if it's so much better that it has to be done, then it has to be done, or if we find out what I think we're going to find out, that there's no point, then there's no point, and we don't have to complicate Zend.
No, that makes complete sense.
Yeah, we should probably get the work done, because it's going to be hard work, and it's going to take more than one of us, probably. So.
Yeah, exactly. And well, Joe, again, thanks so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it. It's nice to have a catch up and, you know, kind of talk about these things and what you've been up to. So, yeah, I mean, is there anything else you'd like to kind of mention to the audience? Anything you want to plug, or apart from your blog?
Oh yeah, read my blog if you want.
Awesome. All right then. Well, audience, it's been a great episode. Great talking to you and for you listening to us. And yeah, so we'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Bye.
You've been listening to 3 Devs and a Maybe. You can contact us at contact@3devsandamaybe.com or follow us on Twitter at 3 Devs and a Maybe.